Hey, it's NPR's Book of the Day. I'm Andrew Limbong. We cover a lot of big topics in today's interview. We're talking about diet culture, domestic abuse, what it's like being the child of a sperm donor, and the beauty of celebrity memoirs. The book is itself a memoir. It's called I Shouldn't Be Telling You This, But I'm Going to Anyway. And it's by Chelsea Devantez, a comedian, TV writer, and podcast host. She talked to NPR's Elizabeth Blair about the book. And the through line through all of these big topics is that you have to laugh about it. Because, she says, otherwise it breaks you. That's ahead.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Live Right, publishers of White Poverty, How Exposing Myths About Race and Class Can Reconstruct American Democracy. Reverend William Barber and Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove envision how to unite millions of impoverished Americans. White Poverty, available now. This message comes from NPR sponsor Noom. Noom's first ever cookbook, The Noom Kitchen, helps you build new habits for a healthier lifestyle. Check out The Noom Kitchen for 100 healthy and delicious recipes to promote better living. Available to buy now wherever books are sold.
Chelsea Devantez is a rabid fan of celebrity memoirs. She herself is something of a celebrity in the world of comedy. Her list of credits includes head writer on The Problem with Jon Stewart, co-executive producer on ABC's Not Dead Yet, starring Gina Rodriguez, and writing for the series Girls 5 Eva. Devontes hosts a podcast about celebrity memoirs called Glamorous Trash.
And today we are book clubbing Donna Summer's memoir, published in 2003, titled Ordinary Girl. I am such a huge Donna Summer fan.
And now she's written her own memoir called I Shouldn't Be Telling You This, But I'm Going to Anyway. Chelsea joins me now. Hello, Chelsea.
I'm so thrilled to be talking with you.
Likewise. You write in your book that from the beginning, you say this is a sad story. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about where the sadness comes from.
The very first thing you'll read is that this book is going to start off very sad, but then it's going to get a lot happier. But first, you have to make it through the tragic, just like I had to. And the beginning of my story, and honestly the middle, and some parts currently get a little dark. And that's where I started the book, with a relationship I was in when I was very young. And it ended in domestic violence. It ended when he did 3 drive-by shootings of my house. And that story has impacted my life so intensely. Its reverberations impact me now. And it was really important to me to write this memoir so that I could write about that story.
Details are marked out, details of that incident. Mm-hmm. Why is that?
So my book is heavily redacted in the first chapter. When I chose to write this memoir, it was because I had finally found the stamina to share this story. And it took me years and years and years to share it. And I wanted to share it for many reasons, but mostly because domestic violence is always talked about in hushed tones and whispers. And one of the main factors in these relationships occurring over and over again is the shame and the silence around it, and how it's hard to even see yourself when you're in them. And so being a comedian and having lived through this myself when I was so young, I wanted to write about it comedically so that it could be in a new genre and reach a new group of people who maybe really needed to hear this story. And when I fully turned in the manuscript, I was told to delete it and that it was too dangerous for me to share. And it was a really intense, grief-filled process. I canceled the book, and then I found a way to keep going, and I really tapped into anger. Anger really pushed me through the end of my publishing process, where I decided if I could not tell the story that happened to me, then I would tell a different story, which is the story of how our systems are set up to silence victims in the name of protection.
You drew a lot of this from looking back at childhood journals, is that right?
That's right. Yeah, I journaled so much as a child.
And it sounds like you had a lot to write about. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about growing up with your mom, what she was like, and your godmother, and I gather you moved around a lot. Sort of paint us a picture.
Yes. So I grew up in 6 different states all over the Southwest. And sometimes people think I'm a military brat, but no, my mom just loved to get divorced. She just loved it. No, I'm just making a joke, but there were a lot of fresh starts and a lot of need to get away from a particular husband or two that were really, really terrible. And at one point in my life, my mom and who I call my godmother, because there's no other word for her, my mom and her best friend, my godmother, both divorced their second alcoholic husbands at the exact same time and agreed to meet up in a small town and start over together. And they formed this 2-parent household because 2 women's salaries in the 90s equaled a man's, and they could escape to something better that way. They were so fabulous in the face of destruction and survival. And, a key quality to surviving the impossible is delusion in a wonderful way, in a beautiful way. They used to put on cocktail dresses and wigs just to go to the grocery store and get milk, to make some fun out of the moment and start their lives over and reclaim the safety and peace that they always deserved.
What did they do for money? What about that part?
Great question. Something I asked my childhood as well. My mom did a lot of things. She worked in the post office. She was a seamstress at a casino. She's an incredible seamstress. She would make these costumes for the showgirls. And as a baby, she would put me in her backpack and take me backstage as she helped the showgirls get dressed. And I do believe that explains my entire personality. And my godmother was an osteopathic physician, freelance.
Let's talk about sort of discovering celebrity memoirs. And what was the first one that got you hooked and why?
My favorite genre of books growing up was always celebrity memoirs. And I say that's what happens when your nearest bookstore growing up is a Walmart. And that is where I grew up. And also, I loved the libraries. And the very first book I ever picked up was Delta Burke's memoir titled Eve Wasn't a Size 6 and Neither Am I. And it's half style book and half memoir. And it was such a gift for me as a teenager in the early 2000s when Paris Hilton's body was it. That was the only body you could have. And the only other body diversity was Mandy Moore. And that's just because she was tall. So those were our options. And I was really, really struggling with disordered eating and my weight. And Delta's book spoke to me so deeply and finally articulated something about how beauty is perceived and weaponized and how people punish you as a woman when you gain weight.
You write poignantly about being conceived through a sperm donor. Mm-hmm. If you wouldn't mind reading another excerpt about how you felt when you learned that.
Absolutely. All right. I'm sure this will be a fun one. Here we go. I'd liken the experience of finding out your donor conceived to emotional vertigo. The world flips upside down, you turn inside out, and every time you look in the mirror, you can no longer see a human staring back. My hands were no longer mine, and my reflection became a mistake. As I stared at myself, every molecule inside my body was suddenly a sneaky little playing me for a fool. I am not of the birds and the bees. I am of the turkey baster and the jizz in a cup. I could have siblings I've never met. I could have hundreds. I have to start over as a fully formed person. Half of my identity has always been wrong. Half of my medical information has always been wrong. I may never know the truth about what's inside me.
Since writing this book, how much research have you done? Have you tried to find siblings you might have?
Well, I did a bunch of research before ever writing this book. And, there's a large portion of the book where I do specifically talk about being donor conceived and the donor conceived community, specifically because our stories are by design from the fertility industry shunned and hidden. And the perspective that's always centered is the parent's perspective on what it is like to choose and conceive and have a child, or, who made you? And no one ever checked on us. when they were making us, the doctors and the scientists, they all chose to tell the parents to keep it a secret, to make the donors anonymous so that the child could never know how they were conceived and how they were formed. And I think what will be shocking for someone listening to this is to know that the donor industry was fully unregulated back then in the 80s when I was conceived. And it's still unregulated. There are no federal regulations to how many times a donor can donate and in how many places. There's no one checking to see if the data you think you're purchasing for your child is even correct. And there's no rights for donor kids we have no rights to get our medical information unless you specifically choose open donation.
Towards the end of the book, you write a thank you chapter to your mom. And you say that she wanted to teach you to have fun, even while you're suffering. Mm-hmm. What did she mean by that? And what do you mean by that in writing it?
So my mom was trying to teach me something that she did successfully when we were growing up, but I didn't accept it, which was that when you are in really terrible positions like we were, like escaping really violent relationships and marriages she was in, dealing with economic instability. At one point, we didn't have anywhere to live, and we lived in an office building. And there's this particular moment where I find out my mom only has $100 left in her bank account. And the next morning, she's like, I found 2 tickets to a gala, and each is $50. Let's get dressed up. Let's not be depressed. Let's go out and we'll celebrate ourselves. And I was so mad that I run out of the house to go get a second job. And I don't go to the gala. And now I wish I had gone. I wish I had gone, because one of the key things in surviving the unsurvivable is finding out how to laugh through it. Otherwise, it breaks you.
That was Chelsea Devantez. Her memoir is I Shouldn't Be Telling You This, but I'm Going to Anyway. Thanks, and it was great talking to you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Mint Mobile. From the gas pump to the grocery store, inflation is everywhere. So Mint Mobile is offering premium wireless starting at just $15 a month. To get your new phone plan for just $15, go to mintmobile.com/switch.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Rosetta Stone, an expert in language learning for 30 years. Right now, NPR listeners can get Rosetta Stone's lifetime membership to 25 different languages for 50% off. Learn more at rosettastone.com/NPR.
All that sitting and swiping, your body is adapting to your technology. Learn how and what you can do about it.
I really felt like the cloud in my brain kind of dissipated. Once I started realizing what a difference these little breaks were making, there's no turning back for me.
Take NPR's Body Electric Challenge. Listen to the series wherever you get your podcasts.